Hey, tell me, what does 4.2 tons worth of pills look like?
A shitload. There was about 14 can openers that they went through, electric can openers. Imagine a skip bin half
Yeah.
full of little pills.
What's the street value of something like that?
Back then, they talked about 750 million, because I'm talking, back 2009, 2010.
What was it about being a detective, the thing that rocked your boat?
I think my big interest was taking a complaint further and actually looking into it, trying to identify the offender, trying to get victims of crime their property back when for break and enter. Investigating is what really drew my passion. Like uniform, you did a little bit of that, but largely, and I think even more now, you're going from job to job to job. So your time to do investigation was a little bit restricted.
When it comes to the crunch on a big one, if you're putting yourself in the homicide situation, you could find yourself in the witness box for a couple of days.
Policing has changed over the years. You look at the three big factors affecting police at the moment. Domestic violence, number one issue across Australia. Mental health, as you said. Up here in Queensland, the number of police shootings we've had recently involving patients with mental health that are threatening police, threatening other people, and the police are forced to act. And youth crime. Youth crime, crime is core business of police.
The I Catch Killers podcast was a fresh start for me, as I left policing behind and started a new life. Over the years, we've laughed together, cried, and shared some powerful moments. Welcome to I Catch Killers. Welcome to another episode of I Catch Killers. Policing is a robust occupation with a strong culture. In such organisations, it takes a person of character to stand up for what they believe in, maintain their integrity, and speak up when they need to. That's exactly what today's guest, retired Superintendent Mark Ainsworth, was known for throughout his career. I never got to work with Mark. He was a member of the Queensland Police for 38 years, and he worked on a number of investigations and had vast experience, including the horrific murder of Alison Baden-Clay, who was killed by her husband in 2012. From what I know about Mark, he's the type of cop I respect. We'll be talking about his stellar police career, getting his thoughts on fighting crime, and we'll break down the investigation into the horrific murder of Alison Baden-Clay. Mark Ainsworth, welcome to I Catch Killers.
Thanks very much, Gary. Nice to be here.
We've had quite a few chats, but we were talking just before we got on mic about life outside the police. How are you finding that?
Absolutely fantastic. I think I wish I would have done it years ago. There's life after policing, and I think the policing career puts people in a good stead to look at life after policing.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that. And I think when we're in police, we feel that we're pigeonholed and policing is all that we can do. But the skill set you develop throughout policing is so broad that it is readily transferable outside the organisation.
100%. And I think, you over our careers, many, many years, you see a lot of things, you learn a lot of things, and you become very diverse in your thinking and capabilities. And transferring that to outside of policing is very, very valuable.
Yeah, I just where the conversation's taken us here, I often thought with policing, because, across the country, and I think overseas as well, there's difficulty filling police forces for applicants or people that want a career in policing. I always thought during policing that it'd be good to be able to step away from it, do something else, freshen up, do something for a couple of years, and then come back to policing. But we don't. I'm speaking here on New South Wales. We don't really have that career path or those options. You can take leave without pay, but it's quite difficult. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, look, I tend to agree with that. And Queensland Police had the same when I was in, that you could take a career break for 12 months and go and try something different, then come back. Or if you enjoyed what you're doing in that career break, you could leave the police. And I think it's a great thing these days, particularly in attracting and retaining police, where it gives them an opportunity to freshen up, go and see what it's like in the real world. And if you don't like it, come back to the police. And I think you come back with a different mindset and a level of commitment once you see what happens in other areas. Or alternatively, you think, well, this life outside of the police is for me. And I think, as you just said, I think with the attraction and retention rate of police all across the world, it's something that needs to be considered. And, is 12 months long enough for a career break? The people that look for the career breaks have generally got a wealth of experience under their belt. So, it's pretty scary seeing organisations losing people with that skill set after all the money invested for training and the experience they get. So I think, yeah, I think there needs to be some options, as you said.
Yeah, because it's if I know I took 12 months leave without pay, and in a long career, it did freshen me up. I did some things. I was doing a little bit of work during that break, and then by the time that 12 months was up, I was itching to get back into policing. I was really looking forward to it. Another thing that I'd like to see with policing, and again we're going off track, but with your experience in policing, I'd like to see our skill set as a police officer. I'm a New South Wales police officer. You're Queensland police officer. Nationally recognised, so we could transfer at the equivalent rank to Queensland. Like it's a qualification that you have. You're a certified police officer. Yeah, they'd need a refresher course, but not start at the bottom, because because of relationships, at one point in time, I was considering starting over in Perth, but I would have had to start at the bottom and work my way up again, even though I had 25 years experience in policing. Do you think that's another thing that could help attract people and make it a little bit more flexible?
Look, I think so, and I think all thoughts have got to be on the table. As you said, your skill set as a police officer, you don't lose particular skills because I moved from Queensland to Victoria or New South Wales. You've got to be across the relevant legislation in those areas, which police officers pick that up very, very quickly. But I think that's another option, that if you can transfer anywhere in Australia, that's a great option for police, to attract them. And if they want to move a family to another area, I think that's a very, very good option. I think it should be on the table to consider. And I think it's not only Queensland or New South Wales alone that are struggling to attract police and retain them. And I think if they all work together to come up with a strategy similar to this, it'd be quite easily achievable.
Yeah, no, I think it's a solution, or a possible solution. Now, I understand the type of police officer you were, and we're going to talk in detail about your police career. But you've also, since you've left the police, you've offered up some strong thoughts and on youth crime. On 38 years in the police force, I think you're entitled to offer opinions. One was about holding parents or guardians responsible for the behaviour of their children, legislating that. Um, Again, it's thinking outside the box. What were your thoughts behind that when you raised it? I think it was on a current affair interview or an article.
Gary, I've had a lot of thoughts about it, and being out of the police and just looking at what was going on, particularly in our communities up here in Queensland, looking at Cairns, Townsville, the Gold Coast, but even my own local community, where it was a common denominator in conversations, people fearing what's going to happen to themselves or the houses, or the youth crime running around out of control. Years ago, as a young uniform officer, this issue was discussed around the Children's Services Department and juvenile aid bureaus at the time, about holding parents accountable for restitution. If someone breaks into a house or damages something, holding the parents accountable. And it never moved. It never proceeded from there. Now, my thoughts on the accountability of parents and guardians, it comes back to a common sense approach, in my view. Maybe people might think it's out of the box, but where does a parent know where their kid is at 3 o'clock in the morning? Should that
Yeah.
parent know where they are? I'm talking 12, 13, 14-year-old kids. You've got to have licenses, to look after certain animals, and, you're responsible for their well-being and you're held accountable. What's the difference between holding a parent or a guardian accountable for the behaviour or whereabouts of the kids at that hour of the morning, or even regardless of that hour of the morning? Where is their accountability in relation to their criminal activities? And look, I'm not saying this relates to all parents and guardians. I understand that some parents and guardians are at their wits' end trying to, control their kids and conform with laws and what's expected in the community. But it's one suggestion I think governments need to look at.
I think there's some merit there, as radical as it might sound, and sort of fly in the face of what we understand with the justice system. But as police officers, we've seen the situations, haven't we? You pick a kid up at 12 or 13-year-old that's out on the streets at 2 a.m. and they say it for adults, no good comes after midnight if you're out on the street. Well, it's pretty much guaranteed if you're a young kid and you're wandering the streets at that time of the night, you're going to get up to mischief. And then you take the child home and you realise there's no supervision, and it's not blaming the child, but maybe have people take responsibility for the children that they're raising. So I'm sure there'd be a lot of pushback for it. We'll delve into it a little bit more, but we've got to look at solutions, haven't we? Options.
100%. And I was quite critical there about, the government up here is wanting to increase penalties, legislate for harsher penalties. But, in all reality, how often does a juvenile, or for that matter, an adult, receive the maximum penalty or a stiffer penalty? So if you want to increase a penalty for, I don't know, for assault to 14, 16 years, is that a deterrent for the kid at the time? And I'd argue it's not. And I think, in my view, it's just an easy way out for government to say we're tightening things up, we're increasing our penalties, where you're not looking at the core issues that are going on. You've only got to look, and you'd know firsthand the recidivism rate of these offenders that are getting charged by the police. Police doing a good job, put them before the court, they get bail, or if they get sentenced to a child facility, they're meeting with like-minded kids, and they come out in most times and reoffend. A part of my suggestion there was, and look, I equate this back to the baby bonus that was introduced by the Labor government back in around the time of the global financial crisis, where $5,000 was given to women that had kids as a baby bonus. My wife has got friends that works in child safety in an area up here north of Brisbane. It's something like a 30% increase on children being dropped on the doorsteps of child safety by particularly young females who got the $5,000 baby bonus, ran out, bought TVs, put drugs up their arms, and here's society trying to look after those kids. So I equate back to there, and you look at the age group of kids that are reoffending up here now or are offending. You've got that 12 to 14 age group, which is very predominant, and that puts a lot of them into that category. I'm not saying all, but a lot. I think that the idea there needs to be some thinking out of the box in relation to custodial sentences. What I suggested previously was considering, and the media ran with it as a boot camp. Well, it wasn't the terminology of boot camp wasn't what I really meant. It was a diversion system, and that this system's nothing new. It's worked. I know there's a group of businessmen that set up a similar sort of setup in the Kakadu area, where a lot of Indigenous people with alcohol problems. And so they set it up as a diversionary system to get these people to come into that area and learn farming skills, break the cycle of, drinking alcohol, becoming drunk, offending. And the actual program they've got has been an outstanding success. And this is run by individuals who have the wealth to set up a program. Now, sorry, it's in it's Kakadu. I think it might be up in the Kimberleys there, but
Yep.
What they've done is they've developed a skill set for people coming into that area. They learn farming skills, they learn training skills. They've got a psychologist that comes up and talks to the people on their arrival and during their stay there. But they've also linked up with the University of New South Wales to allow some leadership and education. And the whole program is working very well. Now, equating that back to a juvenile type problem, I'm talking in what I did mention was in remote or rural areas where kids can be diverted from the court system to an area where they can, get an education, learn some farming skills, learn a trade, but more importantly, getting them away from social media. So no phones, no computers, and just learning life skills that we probably learned as kids growing up without the computers. And then the other part of that is the kids that would like the opportunity to do that. And I don't think we should discriminate between the offenders, but the kids that would love the opportunity to do that should be given the opportunity as well. And as I mentioned earlier on, you might have parents that are just at wit's end about trying to, deal with their kids. They're the sort of people that, their child gets an opportunity to go there. They learn the proper skill set. They get an education. They learn about respect, behaviour. And it's something that I think we need to try, because what's working now, what's not working now is the system that's been around for many, many years.
Well, Mark, what you just said, and I didn't interrupt you because I'm fascinated by your take on it. And if people dissect little parts of that, they'll go, oh, yeah, ex-cop talking tough, send them to a camp. But the way that you explained it and articulated it really breaks it down. And I personally, not just from my experience in police life, just life itself, what you're suggesting there is sounds like a worthwhile thing to pursue. And I balance it out because people that might hear you talk or hear two ex-cops talking, crack down on crime. I'm really glad that you talk about you don't think you just need to strengthen the legislation all the time, because I never saw that working in policing the whole time I was in policing. Okay, we're going to increase stealing a car from 7 years to 14 years. That's not what the offenders, especially kids, are thinking about when they're committing the crime. And the way you describe that is you're breaking a cycle, really, aren't you? You talk about recidivism. You're trying something different, pull them from that environment, and steer them and point them in the right direction.
100%. And as I said, it's nothing new. It happens overseas. The example I gave there with First Nations people, it does work. And I think the money we're spending on building new child detention centres, and that the money diverted to an area like that, even for trial. We have a politician up in far north Queensland, Robbie Katter, who's supportive of it. And I think even for trial, it's worthwhile going through that effort. And, it'd be interesting to see the success rate of it as well. And I'm not saying it's going to be 100% successful, nothing is, but it's trying something different to try and break the cycle of a life of criminality.
Yeah, well, anything you try is not going to be 100. You're not going to have that 100% success. But if you can help one person's life. So, look, I think the fact that someone like yourself, with your experience, is talking about that, I hope people listen. And on the issue of politics, and you rose to the rank of superintendent, so you understand politics, not just within the police, but politics in itself. Quite often in state elections, it becomes they said, well, we're going to take the polar opposite. You need a bipartisan approach, don't you, to fight a problem that's affecting everyone?
100%. And I think from when I first started, and when you first start in the police, you're not aware of all the politics and the political games that are played. But as you grow through the ranks and your service expands and you see what happens, I think there needs to be a separation of powers from the police commissioner and the policing ministerial government.
Yep.
Up here, and my views on this, I'm sure a lot of people will smack them down, but you've only got to look at the COVID situation, which happened, and I'm pretty sure it happened in other jurisdictions. Police became babysitters at motels. Now, cost the community a hell of a lot of money. Now, why do the police have to get dragged into doing that when you could have security guards, you could have other people there performing that role? If someone doesn't conform with the requirements, call the police to deal with that person. I think from what I'm seeing is the police, particularly up here in Queensland, are used as a stopgap measure for other duties, which are not necessarily policing duties. Police everywhere operate 24/7. A lot of government departments shut their doors at 5 o'clock, and everything after that becomes a policing problem, which, in my view, in a lot of instances, takes police away from doing what their core role is. You look at COVID, you look at the number of hours and the amount of money spent on overtime, having police sitting outside buildings babysitting. That to me was an absolutely ridiculous scenario when there's plenty of other work that that the police could be doing, which is relevant to their roles.
Well, if you're worried about people smacking you down, I'm not going to smack you down about that one, because I agree wholeheartedly. And I think there needs to be the separation of powers between the police, the politicians, and the courts. I think all those areas need their own autonomy, and sometimes the lines get blurred. And it's you made a point there, and I hadn't even thought along those lines that. Who are you going to call? Call the police. They're 24/7. If there's a problem, and then we delve into mental health issues. And I know, in New South Wales, Queensland, across the country, police are getting frustrated that they feel like they've been brought into these mental health situations where that's not, ideally their role, and that's the way police get used up.
And you're right. Look, policing has changed over the years. You know, you look at the three big factors affecting police at the moment: domestic violence, number one issue across Australia; mental health, as you said. Up here in Queensland, the number of police shootings we've had recently
Mm.
involving patients with mental health that are threatening police, threatening other people, and the police are forced to act. And youth crime. You know, youth crime or crime is core business of police.
Yeah,
Um, Police go there to keep the peace. Domestic violence, they go there to keep the peace, but it's a whole of community problem. Mental health is a whole of community problem. But far too often, are police held accountable for what they've done, dealing at a domestic violence issue or what they haven't done, dealing with mental health people. Um, and I think, you know, a lot of the time police are unfairly targeted. And look, I'm first to admit a lot of police, and I'm not going to say a high percentage, a small
yeah.
percentage of police will do the, you know, probably not follow through things and do things properly, but you get that in every occupation. What I am saying is that I think there needs to be a reset of the responsibilities and requirements of police in
Yeah.
each jurisdiction.
No, it all makes sense, and we could talk on all those subjects for the full podcast. But let's talk about yourself for a bit, about your career. Why did you join the police? Were you born into the job? Was it something you always aspired to, or did you trip into it?
No, I sort of tripped into it. I've got no family members all in the police, or never had been. An uncle through marriage, he was in the fingerprint section up here in Brisbane, and he started talking about the police one day. And I was fortunate enough that he had approval to take me out on a weekend when I was in year 11 at school, and saw what he did and got really excited and interested. And that changed my mind about wanting to join the police. So year 12, I was going through Kedron High School, did the application to apply to get into the police. And then January the following year, I started police academy as a 17-year-old. And that was my life.
I laugh because you come in, and especially as a 17-year-old, I joined a little bit later, but as a 17-year-old, you would have no idea about the world you're about to step into.
100% Gary. And back in those days, I did an 18-month training. Cadetship was 18 months. So I had all these fellas the same age. You weren't allowed to get sworn in until you're 19 years of age. And unfortunately for me, I was not 19 when I finished my training. So I was used as a bit of a gopher. But in saying that, learnt a lot of things. I helped a prosecutor carry his bags and sit in court, and learnt a hell of a lot. And you know, that was great. But I can still remember my very first night out and my very first arrest, and it was for the big offence of drunk in a public place. I went home that night and I was shitting myself. Have I done everything right? You know, was that bloke really drunk? You know, questioning yourself, because you said you don't, it's a new world. But, you know, you learn back then from experienced police you were working with. You got some good advice from, you know, your sergeants and senior sergeants and workmates, and your skills just developed there. But you're right. You know, I saw a lot of things as a 19, 20-year-old, I'm sure you did,
Yeah.
that a lot of kids my age would never ever see. And you grow up very, very quickly from that.
The experiences and the importance of having a good mentor. Your first arrest was drunk, someone drunk. Mine was a ticket evader. I didn't realise. I honestly didn't realise you could summons a person for that offence, and I arrested him, and he just happened to be a local. Guy that had been creating a lot of problems. All the other police thought I was being a tough guy arresting this bloke for a ticket evasion. I didn't know you could subpoena people for or issue a summons, and so they thought I was just being a hard ass. So,
Yeah.
no, I knew what I was doing, but yeah, the mistakes you can make, and I feel sorry for the younger police today because society, well, we didn't have the phones, it wasn't all CCTV footage, and we just didn't seem as accountable. And if you made a mistake, you'd have someone that you could trust, a mentor that would say, look, that's not how we do things, this is how we do things, and you would learn. And you'd gravitate towards people that you were comfortable going to steer you in the right direction. But today's police don't have that luxury, do they?
No, I think the level of accountability has gone through the roof. And as you said, look, I remember before I retired, there was a siege situation down in the city mall here in the middle of the day, where a fella armed with a firearm. And I was an acting chief super at that stage, and I attended the scene, and I could not believe everyone in the crowd who had been, you know, pushed right away
Yeah.
from it. just there with their cameras up in the air, photographing every movement of everyone there. And as you said, we never had that these days.
Yeah,
Now,
yeah,
you'll see on media, the police, doing something, assaulting someone. They show that one part. They
yeah,
don't tell the full story. Now, there's always two sides to every story.
yeah,
So that is a real difficult thing these days, and it's not only policing. Sports people see it, but policing now is very, very difficult. I was only thinking about it last night. When I was first in the police as a youngster, the biggest issue then was heroin.
yeah,
We had bikie bandits running around, using firearms to rob banks to get their money to buff up on heroin. Then they sleep it off and become mellow. These days, you've got a lot more um, situations that police have to deal with. As you said, mental health,
yeah,
that's a horrific area, and the different forms of drugs getting out there now and the level of violence. Um, I wasn't even issued a firearm when I first started in the job. It took about 6 months before we got one. I had a handcuff and a baton. But you look at
yeah,
the police now, that what they're kitted out with. You got your tasers, you got your capsicum spray, firearms, but they've got a choice of uh, different devices to use. But back in my day, we that's all we had. But and
yeah.
can I say that I don't think the level of violence was around as what it is now.
Yeah, true, true. And with all the tactical options that they have, with the level of training, I should say, lack of level of training, it makes it very difficult too. Like I had the gun and the handcuffs, and you'd go in there to make the arrest, and then the OC spray came out, the taser comes out, and I look at the police at what they got on their belts now, and under pressure in a critical moment, there's so many options. I don't know. It just seemed to be easier when we had the big batons, and you knew what you were going to do. If you couldn't, contain this person physically, you had a baton, and if it escalated, you had a gun. Now there's so many different options, which needed to be brought in. But I think the training needs to come in that people feel comfortable using all those different uh, devices or weapons.
Yeah. And look, I think back in the day too, communication was your go-to and effective communication with people. But I
Yeah,
think the young police these days, trying to communicate with someone that's drug affected, someone that's got mental health issues, it's a huge challenge.
yeah,
And
and And on it too, the respect has gone for police to a degree. Just society for a variety of reasons is not respecting authority. And you talked about the COVID period. I don't think that helped a lot of people liking police. Around this area in Sydney, helicopters hovering around, police helicopters checking if people are out of their homes. Like it doesn't create a good relationship between the community and the police that were there to serve the community.
yeah, look, I agree. I think there's a lot of learnings from COVID that we can take away from it. And I think the big thing is working in well. During the COVID period, I was at the Racing Integrity Commission here,
Yep.
and racing still continued during the COVID period. But we had a group of people within the industry, stakeholders. We worked together to put in things in place on how people would still earn their living, how people would still race, but conforming with all the COVID legislation. And I think that was quite effective in doing that. There was a mutual understanding between all the parties involved as what we needed to do, how we conformed, and I think that worked pretty well. I think from a policing point of view, again, police were thrown into the ring. There was legislation developed, and the police had to enforce that legislation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Tell us about your career. Just describe your career, and I've got details of your career here, and it's been wide and varied on different things. Working with external organisations on special investigations, the Crime Commission. Um, Tell us about your career.
Well, Gary, from the outset, I think policing is a fantastic career for anyone. You look at my CV there, and I've had so many opportunities to do different things. One thing that really attracted me to the police was going in each day. You never knew what you're going to get up to, what was coming your way. The other beauty is the ability to transfer and move within the organisation to different areas, which I think is a fantastic opportunity. And getting right back to our very initial conversation here, upskilling yourself across a multitude of disciplines. I had started off the same as everyone in uniform career, worked in traffic branch for several months. I didn't like it. Went to suburban stations, absolutely loved it. You got to know your community. You got to know who the people that needed a bit of attention in the area were. You're out patrolling, meeting other people. And then I had 32 years in plain clothes, which I absolutely loved. Um, Running local CIBs, working in local criminal investigation branches. Um, and then I had the opportunity to do a number of other things. And probably one of the best opportunities I had was working at the Australian Crime Commission as the manager of the Queensland office, but being given the head of determination role for major and organised crime around Australia with task forces around Australia. And that was absolutely brilliant. You got to see how police in other jurisdictions operated, um, and engaging with those people was fantastic. Royal Commissions, yes, I was a constable seconded to the Fitzgerald Commission of Inquiry as a surveillance operative. There was five
Yep.
of us initially that started that, and that was a real eye opener for me, particularly at that stage of my career. And then, the Royal Commissions on top of that, and did the Queensland Flood Royal Commission, which again was very much an eye opener, talking to a lot of people who had lost family members and friends through the flooding devastation right across the southeast corner. And then Trade Union Royal Commission, which is very topical at the moment.
Yeah.
And then since retiring, the DNA Royal Commission, the DV Commission, and a little bit the Brittany Higgins Commission down south. But probably out of all that period of time, I thoroughly enjoyed my plainclothes career.
Yeah.
You met good people, you met poor people, you saw the best and worst of people, and I think it was great working in a very close knit team environment in those areas.
You would have gone through the stages of a detective sergeant, whether you're in major crime or in local area commands or local police stations. I found that rank very rewarding. It was exciting. I don't know if it correlated with the stage of your life and career, but you've finally, the shackles are off, you've got the experience, and you're going to start running jobs. Do you have memories or investigations that you thought, yeah, I've found my passion?
Certainly did, and I think as getting promoted to detective sergeant, as you said, is the big step. You think I've finally made it.
Yeah.
I was fortunate enough as a detective sergeant to run a local criminal investigation branch and had a great crew working under me. Um, and that responsibility that came with that position was good, ensuring that people were working with you were travelling down the same path as yourself, but also forming a close knit team. And, policing, in my view, it's like sport. If you haven't got a team not singing in the same direction, you're going to have problems. And I think molding that team, leading that team, and to achieve results was quite enjoyable.
Very, very satisfying, and I know, like you have a sporting background and interest, and the way that you've described a team, those even like working up to becoming the detective sergeant, when you thought, who are these wise old men or women that know all this information and can just make decisions like that? Then all of a sudden you look and you become that person, and you got what you think are young kids coming to you going, what do we do now, boss or sarge?
Yep.
But the teamwork aspect of it, they're my fond memories of when you had a good crew. Not all the same type of personalities. It was always a range of misfits, and someone had a skill set here or there, and you had a job. You get an investigation, and you follow it, and you get that really satisfying moment where you've got the breakthrough. All of a sudden, this mystery, you know who the person is, and then you set your traps to catch that person.
That's right. And I think you said, you'd run a major incident room, and I'd always appreciate the staff that were there, whether it was the most, you have your briefings in the morning and the afternoon, and whether it was the most junior uniformed constable and the most senior detective in the room. I always made the point of going around the room individually and from the outset saying,
Yeah.
look, you've all come from different backgrounds here, you've all got different skills. Don't think your idea is stupid because we mightn't have thought about it, and encourage them to come forward and feel part of that team. And I think that's the best way to get results. You're embracing everyone's ideas, you're bringing them on board as part of the team, and sort of singing from the same sheet.
Yeah, 100%. And I was shown that by people I respected. That is the way to get the best out of a team and let everyone. And I think it also motivates people to think that they're part of it. And as you said, you could have the most junior person that's just straight out of uniform sitting there in awe of all these detectives, but makes a comment, and it's probably the smartest comment, potentially could be the smartest comment in the room and points you in a direction.
100%, and it's just giving them the confidence to speak up that they're not going to be ridiculed if that
Yeah.
people think it's stupid. So yeah.
I want to speak to you, and we'll do that in part two about the murder of Alison Baden Clay. But is there an investigation that you found particularly satisfying, as like one particular investigation that sticks with you, other than Alison Baden Clay's murder, that sticks with you that you thought, okay, this is what policing is all about?
Yeah, probably the Australian Crime Commission in Victoria, when I was doing the head of determination for the high risk crime groups, we were working on a operation conjointly with the Piranha Task Force in Victoria
Yep.
and customs in relation to the importation of a large quantity of ecstasy pills. We worked on that job for about 12, 14 months and had a great team, great relationship with the other jurisdictions. And when it came to resolution, we uncovered 4.2 tonne of ecstasy pills, which were brought in to the ports in Victoria, which is still the largest single seizure of ecstasy pills anywhere in the world.
I'm just trying to comprehend that amount. 4.2 tonnes, you said.
4.2 tonnes. It came in tomato tins on a shipping container, and the first couple of rows when the shipping container was unpacked were genuine tomatoes in the tins, and then as you got further back, there was the ecstasy pills, and that I just could not believe. As you just reacted there, that the quantity, the sheer quantity, but the way that the three groups worked in together.
Hey, tell me, what does 4.2 tonnes worth of pills look like? What?
A shitload. It's well, I think there was about 14 can openers that they went through, electric can openers, and it was amazing. A skip bin, if you imagine a skip bin half full of little pills.
Right. So
it was incredible.
Okay. And what's
It
the
was,
street value? What's the street value of something like that?
Back then, they talked about 750 million, because I'm talking, back 2009, 2010. The value of this was very, very high. But the offenders, what they did, the tomato tins, they were packed in boxes of 6, each of those tins, to get the weight of the container consistent, so to get through any x-raying or checking by customs, they had to get the weight of the container ideal. So what they did is a number of tomato tins they filled up with rocks to make sure they had the weight correct, and the rest were all pills. So yeah, it was a massive load of ecstasy pills. Never seen anything like it.
You guys and girls really wrecked someone's party for that. Someone would have been disappointed with that type of seizure.
I think so, and I think the ringleaders back in Italy were the ones that were become a little bit hot under the collar. That they'd lost all that money and drugs. So yeah,
I can imagine the reaction.
The risk you take when you want to get into those enterprises, and then the Australian Federal Police became involved as well. And to me, that was just a great example of working with other jurisdictions to get an outstanding result.
Yeah. And there is a satisfaction there. Like I say to people, and I put my hand up, that as a detective, you feel like you're a hunter. You're hunting the person, and people might say, "Oh, that's a bit extreme," but that's what you feel like. And if you're involved in an investigation like that, and it comes to fruition, where the point where you recover 4.2 tonnes of ecstasy pills, it's you're on a bit of a high, aren't you, after something like that?
Oh, look, 100%. And I think it's, again, I'll go back to the sport thing. You have a win, you celebrate. And I think that was one of the good things I liked about the team environment in the police. You had a good win, you achieved a good result. And a very important part is celebrating as a team. And I think these days, I'm not sure whether that still occurs to the same extent as what had happened when you and I were around. And I hope it does. Well, I think that's a very important part of it.
Yeah, because there's a lot that can be said negative side of the culture of police, but there was a lot of positive sides to the culture, that uniformity, that the brotherhood. But there was good aspects to the culture, and we'll talk about the Fitzgerald inquiry. We had the Wood inquiry down here in New South Wales. I wonder if that misses with policing now, because I don't know about you, but when I joined policing as a lifetime career. It was a vocation. That's what I was going to do. I think people, from what I hear, and you and I have both been out around about the same time, people are using it as a stepping stone. I'll have a look at policing, do that for a bit, and then move on to something else. And so they don't invest as much as I think you need to when you're committed and you're a career police officer.
Look, I agree with you. As I said, I left from school straight into policing. That's all I knew from the age of 17 to the age that I got out. Um, and I knew that I had a career path in front of me. I knew if I didn't want to be a uniform officer, I could go into forensics, I could go and become a detective, and all those options were there.
Yeah,
And I think that's a big thing that people need to look at. And I think a lot of it comes back to recruitment. I can remember the hoops I had to jump through to get recruited to join the police, in front of a panel and everything. But
yeah,
I put in the work as 100% committed that I want to be a police officer. I'm not sure what recruiting standards are like now. I know up here in Queensland, we went down the stage of 50-50 male and female.
yep,
And, hearing reports that, males who would have been a good police officer missing out because they weren't of the right sex. Now that's changed now. We've gone down the stage of, got to have a university degree behind you to get into the police. Well, I don't think that worked that well either. I think it's a recruitment is a big part of it. Getting the right people, getting the people that look, you don't have to be the sharpest tool in the shed to be a police officer. As long as you're streetwise, you've got a level of common sense, and you
yep.
can communicate. They're the three critical things that I believe, that can make you a good police officer, and then you learn as you go along.
And 100%, like, there's obviously a benefits to having the intelligence, but you put a team together, and you could have the person that just had the communication skills and the street smarts. You can have the IT expert that's fascinated by the computer system that the rest of us are going, yeah, well, which button do we push type
Yeah.
situation. You need that cross section of people. I want to talk about the Fitzgerald inquiry, and I raise that not, yeah, sitting in judgment, because we had the same thing down here. And yeah, you look at any police organisation, I'd suggest across the globe, and there's been pockets of corruption. I know with the Wood Royal Commission, I was a major crime detective at the time, and it hit me hard. There was shame associated with what came out in the inquiry, and the level of corruption. I say isolated pockets of corruption, and it was exposed and removed. It needed to be done. No one's arguing against that. But I know at the time when it was happening, there was a lot of resentment from detectives in major crime, because we were all being tarred with the one brush. You worked surveillance, as I understand, in the Fitzgerald inquiry. That would have been a tough gig for you, I would imagine, because it's working in your own organisation, and the type of things that you would have seen and uncovered.
Yeah, it was Gary, as I mentioned before. I think I had about 4 years, 5 years service at that stage, and corruption and inappropriate relationships I've never come across anywhere in my career. So it was a huge eye opener.
Yeah,
That was back in the days where everyone had pages, mobile phones the size of a house, and have one
yeah,
of them. Batteries last about 10 minutes, and those days there, we weren't allowed into the office where the investigators were. So we'd meet in the park, and our sergeant would come and give us a job, what it was, and you look
yeah,
at it and you think, holy dooly, is this really happening? And um, it was a real big eye opener for me.
yeah,
And I think some of the other people who'd been around a little bit longer, for me, was a little bit of a shock.
yeah.
But for me personally, it was an eye opener. Not mainly, I think, looking at the way some of the organised criminal networks worked, how
Yeah,
they infiltrated policing ranks,
yeah.
and just the way they operated in their own little environment was quite interesting.
Yeah, I think it flourished to a degree. Society had changed, but there wasn't the accountability. I can't see that level of corruption occurring in day and age. I think everyone's more accountable. But yeah, it must have been a tough gig. And after you worked there, I know people that worked in those type of roles when they came back into the organisation, there was some I think wrong resentment of the people because of the role that they had done. But any fair-minded police officer has to say, well, we don't stand for corruption. Did you find any of that coming back into the organisation after working on the Fitzgerald inquiry? And I'll just clarify, just in case we're talking, we know what it was. Fitzgerald inquiry was the inquiry into corruption within the Queensland Police.
Gary, I was very lucky. I went from Fitzgerald inquiry to relieving officer in charge of the Valley CIB. The Valley CIB here is a very much smaller scale of what you've got there, King's Cross.
I've done some work up there in the Valley. I get the sense of it. Yep.
And look, a lot of the main players in the Fitzgerald inquiry, the organised criminals, had businesses and enterprises set up around the Valley.
Yeah.
So I must admit I was a little bit nervous about coming back, but the team I had around me, I think I was accepted very well. I'm probably be naive to think they thought, oh, who's this dog coming from working on coppers and working on them?
Yeah.
And now he's our boss. But I just treat every day as it comes. What you see is what you get with me. And I've never had any issues, never had any threats, never had anything directly to my face. Probably a lot, what the police are like behind your back, be a lot going on. But yeah, no, I never had too many issues at all.
Okay, so is there in the work that you've done in policing, what was the area that was your favourite part? What did you enjoy most about being a detective, and why you chose detective? Because there's some very worthwhile career paths in uniform. What was it about being a detective that was the thing that rocked your boat?
I think my big interest was taking a complaint further and actually looking into it. Trying to identify the offender, trying to get victims of crime their property back for break and enter. But just investigating is what really drew my passion. Like uniform, you did a little bit of that, but largely, and I think even more now, you're going from job to job to job. So your time to do investigation was a little bit restricted. And I just loved the investigation field once I got into it, getting a report from a break and enter, having a look at it, doing door knocks, doing the grunt work that sometimes uniform staff don't have time to do, and working out a pattern, and getting a crook and talking to the crook and getting their trust and getting them to cough up to multiple break and enters and going for drive in the car to point out where they did them and getting property back. I think that was rewarding. But one big thing I learned from it is communication, is, talking to people initially how you'd like to be spoken to, treating them as human as well. And then, you up the ante or down the ante from there. But it's a good starting point. And I think, a lot of the crooks, my wife only said the other day, we're talking to someone that we're out somewhere up the coast, and the fella came up and spoke to me. And she said, "Who's that?" And I said, "I arrested him back in 1993, So not every crook's going to do that to you, but I think if you treat them properly, you can earn a level of respect. But the investigation side I thought was fantastic. We used to do the early morning drug raids. You get information on places, and that was a great team building exercise. And it had the adrenaline going. Nothing like kicking in a door of someone's house at 7 a.m. and finding gear, and it's. That sort of thing was just great. I just thoroughly enjoyed it.
The way you just described that, Mark, it's almost like I know on jobs like that, and I'm thinking, and we're getting paid for this? Like the level of excitement, you'd pay money to actually have the experience of, doing an early morning raid or, investigating a particular type of crime.
Yeah, 100%. And, a lot of it there was like that, and it was all legitimate, and we had to conform with legislation and policies and procedures, but conforming to that didn't take the fun away from doing that sort of work.
Exciting. How'd you find court? Because that's I think court scares a lot of people away from potentially being detectives, because if you're going to put your hand up as a detective, you're going to spend a lot of time in the witness box under cross-examination. Whether you've done everything right, it doesn't matter, because these barristers, defence barristers or solicitors, get paid a hell of a lot of money to make you look stupid in front of the magistrate or the jury. How did you find court experience, and how did it develop over the years?
I guess I was fortunate that giving court evidence pre-Fitzgerald, when you're
Yep.
relying on type record interviews or interviews in your notebook, and getting attacked by legal officers, barristers and that. Well,
Yeah.
you just wrote these notes, you just made this up, and even though their client had signed it, adopted that as a true
Yeah.
record, and then going on there to after Fitzgerald, where interviews and everything were tape recorded, I think that took a lot of the angst away.
Yeah.
But it still didn't take away, why did you do this? Why did you do that? Why didn't you do this? You said this to my client. And I think, going in there is straight up front, it either
Yeah.
happened or it didn't. That's what I tried to adopt. Um, it can be harrowing, but one thing I notice now is, you look at people getting detective appointments that haven't given evidence too much in a district or Supreme Court.
Yeah.
And I think that's one thing that we're seeing is, a bit of a de-skilling in that ability, which is quite important. It's Yeah, I think the tape recording of interviews has reduced a lot of the angst going to court,
And that
but not all the angst.
we had that down in New South Wales. I forget the years that it came in, Iris interviews, and I was well entrenched in detectives at that stage, and we all thought the world was going to end. What, you've got to get them on tape, and it's not sit down interviews, and it was confronting. And I remember I put my hand up to go down there to learn it, to become a trainer in training it, because I thought that's the interview room is a skill that you need as a detective, and if that's the way that we're doing it, you've got to get your head around it. Yes, I do think it reduced a lot of time in court, and I think it's beneficial. No one would argue against it. It's a much better system to have in place. But you made the point there that people haven't got court experience. I was working in homicide, and people were getting to the rank of pretty close to detective sergeant, and you could count on one hand the time they've been in the witness box. And I almost felt sorry for them, because when it comes to the crunch on a big one, if you're putting yourself in the homicide situation, you could find yourself in the witness box for a couple of days, like on complex matters. And I don't think they get the experience. I had a detective. I didn't like him at the time for what he did to me, but he set me up at the local court. He knew the defence solicitor and told me not to worry about preparing for this case. It was just a break and enter, because it'll go easy. He'll probably end up pleading guilty. So I naively took his advice and didn't get my head round the brief. He normally would get in the witness box before I'd get in the witness box, but on this occasion he didn't get in the witness box. He said, "No, you go in first." I got in there and just totally carved up. I came out. I think my tie was around the back of my suit, and it was just a complete mess. And I'm thinking, my God. And he said, "How'd you go?" Because he wasn't allowed in court. And I said, I got ripped apart. I should have prepared. And he said, "Have you learned anything?" And I said, "Yeah, I've got to prepare for court." And then he introduced me to his mate, who was the defence solicitor. So that was, but I never forget that lesson, Mark. And it's something that you've got to prepare, and you've got to be professional. And that's sharp end of the work that you do as a detective, because it's all right having the fun, investigating, locking people up, but when it's all said and done, you want that conviction beside the arrest.
100%. And I equate it to it's like going to the toilet. If you don't use the paper, you're in the shit, and you've got to place a lot
Yeah,
of emphasis on paperwork and preparation. As you said, your paperwork going to court, your briefs of evidence, your statements have to be spot on
yeah,
to close the gap for any cross-examination if we're getting ripped apart. But preparation is critical. And I think in major cases where, getting your team together,
yeah.
to make sure you're all singing from the same page, that everyone is on track with what did occur. And I think that's a critical part of it, particularly these days where you have the high profile matters where you've got a team and, the big media locally, interstate, overseas.
Yep.
That's where it becomes absolutely critical that the team is on the game,
Yeah.
and yeah,
Well,
again,
and the further up, and I think we can talk about this in part two and Alison Baden Clay matter, but the further up you get in the rank structure and running an investigation, you're very much reliant on the people below you to brief you because you might have thousands of pieces of information. It was a detective inspector if I was running a job. I can't get my head around all that information, so I have to rely on the people underneath me to pass that information on and make the decisions accordingly. So it very much is about attention to detail in investigations and managing the sheer volume of information.
yeah, that's correct. And I think as a detective inspector or detective superintendent, one of the roles is, those Baden Clay when I was a figurehead in that role, media figurehead, largely to take the pressure away from the detective senior sergeant running it.
Yep.
But it was a great team underneath us. We briefed in the morning, we briefed in the afternoon. And I think that is where it's absolutely critical. And I see my role as that is, getting the information, but also providing the team with the resources and everything they needed to allow them to do the job properly. And we'll talk about it,
Yeah. No.
later on. But it's
Very, very much so, because I'd like to get your views as a superintendent involved in the bigger investigations and what that role is. But look, we might take a break here. We're also going to dive into domestic violence, which is something that nationally is very topical at the moment. But thanks for part one, and when we get back into part two, and we're going to carry the conversation further and delve deeper into your career and some of the investigations and your thoughts on policing. But having said that, you've left me with some thoughts about your management of youth crime, and I think there needs to at least be discussion about some of the things that you're raising.
yeah, look, Gary, I think it's great. I think it's a topic in itself.
Yeah,
And what I think what I'd really love to see, that just talking
yeah,
to you now, is policymakers. You look at a lot of the policymakers in government departments. They're young kids that have come straight out of uni. They've never seen an angry man. How many of them gone out on the road to see what's going on, to see what occurs? To
yeah,
go on patrol. Now, I remember down the valley we were running an operation.
yeah,
The policymakers at that stage came out and spent a night in the street with us, and they saw it firsthand.
yeah,
And I think youth crime and the way it's going, we saw the decision in Victoria yesterday. I think that is an area where it needs to be a solid panel discussion with some of the policymakers, politicians, and the police, and you
yeah.
know, industry that are dealing with it.
All the
It's
people involved in it that understand, because it's a complex problem and it's not one simple solution is going to fix it. It needs a multi-layered approach, really, doesn't it?
it does 100% like DV, exactly the
Yeah.
same.
Okay. Well, we'll be back shortly for part two.
Thanks, Gary.